Welcome to HR Voices, a podcast where people leaders share their side of the story. We talk about the challenges they're facing, how they're addressing them, and what changes they hope to see as the workplace evolves. This podcast is sponsored by All Voices, the all-in-one employee relations platform. Hello, and welcome to this episode of HR Voices. I'm your host, Rebecca Taylor, and I'm here with Sunaina Lobo, the Chief People Officer at Omnissa. Suni, welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Rebecca.
Yeah. How's your day going so far? I know you said you've been back-to-back in meetings, so life of HR, right?
I know it's pretty much Monday. Monday is the day, right? No, it's been good. It's been really great. Thanks for
Good.
asking.
Very nice. So I know, being a chief people officer is always sort of a very broad type of title, right? So, because it can cover so many different sort of areas and gambits within HR. So can we start just with sort of a basic understanding of what your role is at Omnissa and kind of the, who you're managing, who you're taking care of, who you're representing, what does sort of your role really entail?
So I'll just start with who we are, because
Yeah.
a lot of people probably don't know Omnissa. We've been around for a long time, and we were part of VMware. So we're a carve out from VMware as a standalone company just under a couple of years ago. We're a software company, and we provide AI-driven digital workforce platform to mainly enterprise customers. And what excites me about what we can do from a people perspective with the business is the fact that the two things are really well interlinked, right? What we do in HR is to provide a great employee experience from the hire to retire. And I call it the hire to retire cycle. When we hire folks to the time, folks make a decision to leave us or look for other opportunities. And that whole continuum from hire to retire is what my team and I are responsible for at Omnissa. So you asked about, what do we do and what does the business do? It actually is interlinked quite well. And that's what excited me about coming to Omnissa, the product, what we do for our customers, and then what we can do in the people group as a product to our internal customers.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's rare to kind of be in a position where you're working for a company that essentially does or supports the job that you're also doing sort of within the organization. Like, that's really cool. So, I've been doing some research on Omnissa even just before we kind of got to chatting because I was really curious because coming from HR myself, I see workplace experience, I see all this. I'm like, ooh, I want to know more. So I imagine, that all these talk about AI and how to incorporate AI into sort of people workflows is probably, I don't want to assume, but would it be something that you're kind of living in maybe a little bit more than someone in a different field might be living in?
I think being in a tech world these days, within a tech industry and supporting, tech organizations from a people perspective, AI is always front and center, irrespective of what the goals are of the company, right? And the reason I say that is because, as you've probably heard a lot of people say, it's not about technology. It's not about technology. It's about the change management aspects of adoption of that technology. It's the human aspects of the adoption of the technology. So we are really well placed within our business because we are so, AI native in the work that we do from a product perspective. It's a natural evolution for us to be thinking about it from a people perspective. And when I think about the challenges that people teams face, it's about not only being part of the adoption of AI, but actually leading the adoption of AI in organizations because it's all about change. It's not about the technology. And if you are, if you are a people leader, you're front and center of change and transformation for any business, helping the business accelerate their business goals via the adoption of AI is a natural fit for the people organization. And I've just joined Omnissa 5 weeks ago. This is week 6. It's the start of week 6.
Come.
Yeah, thank you. And so we're crafting our people strategy and our people team org design. And that's front and center of the conversations we're having, right? How do we make sure that operationally, the people team gets the stuff that we need to do done? And how do we leapfrog, how do we leapfrog this whole effort of in the operations arm of HR, I want to create a shared services center, for example, could be a goal, right? Now, how do we leapfrog? Let's not create a shared services center. Let's actually just use AI, right? To create a personalized employee experience versus go via a shared services center. We can just actually go via an AI bot. I think when you're developing your people strategy for folks, new chief people officers, or also for folks who have been there a while in their roles, keeping AI front and center of the employee experience and how you can actually enhance that employee experience, which you will not be able to do in a normal world, or we would not be able to do without the onset of AI, is exciting for me, and it's exciting for my team.
Yeah, yeah. I love your, you're alluding to the idea of kind of automating some parts of the job, especially within the shared services space, using something like AI. And I know that there's a lot of, folks who might be listening to this, their next natural question might be something like how. So what are some sort of key components to really doing that right? So if you are going to think about a piece of a shared services department that you could, create a bot or automate different technology, what are some of the like key things to make sure you have in place to be able to even consider making that happen?
It's a really good question, and we can talk about it from a shared services perspective because a lot of people go there, right? Or from a talent acquisition perspective because again a lot of people go there. I'd like to talk a little bit about a talent development use case, which people don't naturally go to, right? So if you think about how we develop talent in organizations traditionally, there was a big emphasis on say, starting with the career conversation with your manager. If you look at that one aspect of the talent development cycle, the very key to be thinking about, what is it that you're trying to solve for on a holistic level, whether shared services, talent development, recruitment, breaking that down into pieces and figuring out which pieces can we leverage AI for and which pieces actually need the human intervention, right? So that's the place to start. So when you think about talent development as an entire life cycle and a continuum, and you say career conversations is something that I think, we can revolutionize, right? So today, the way organizations do it is an employee writes down his or her goals and then, what their career objectives are, and the manager reviews that and they have a conversation and they think about, next steps in terms of development, right? What if you were completely going to flip that on its head and you had a conversational intelligence software that was actually recording an employee's thoughts around their own career and then putting that down into a format that is decipherable, right? And then that is shared with the manager, and the conversation with the manager and the employee, which is very essential. It's that we don't want that to go away, and we've identified that we don't want that to go away when we mapped out the process.
Right.
That is really important. That conversation can be about the conversation and not about taking down notes and writing down next steps, right?
Yeah.
Because all of that is automated. And
Yeah.
all of that is, there's insight drawn into that conversation via AI tools and technology,
Yeah.
which can actually spit out that conversation for you in a format that is, again, decipherable
Yeah.
and can suggest developmental options for the individual, for the manager, almost like a career coach.
Yep.
So the conversation with your manager is actually focused on that conversation and building that relationship, because what creates stickiness with employees, we all know, is the ability to bring their whole selves to work, to be able to have a real conversation with people, to find purpose and meaning in what they do. That can come from the conversation with the manager. All
Yeah.
of the other bits can be automated.
Yeah.
And right? So
Yeah.
that's just a nice use case to think through when you're thinking about any aspect of your HR process or cycle, whether it's operations or talent acquisitions, talent development. Total rewards is an area that's ripe for change and transformation, right? Because it's all about analyzing spreadsheets and numbers, and can we leverage AI to do that? And then we focus on the things that really matter, which are, what really do our employees want
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to rewards, when it comes to benefits? Are we tailoring our benefits to suit our employees' needs, depending on where they are at in their own journey and life cycle, right? Or are we doing a one size fits all? So one of the things that I think is going to be really important moving forward with AI is this hyper personalization of the employee experience, right? So you don't have to come in and be like pulled into this organizational construct. We can actually come to you and say, because of who you are as a person and where you're at in your life cycle or your journey, your career journey, here's what we would recommend for you. So it's a proactive, data driven approach
Yeah.
to addressing employee concerns, but also employee development.
Yeah. I love that as a focus for employee development too, because that sometimes can be one of the more charged types of situations that managers have to deal with, right? You know, giving feedback, defending feedback sometimes, and making sure that whatever feedback that you're giving is really grounded in behavioral things that may have witnessed and not assumptions that you're making. That can be really, really hard, especially in remote teams. I mean, I know Omnissa works with remote teams everywhere, right? So I can imagine even just seeing it across customers, but even within your own remote organization, it's harder for managers to witness behaviors to give that as feedback to an employee just because you're not around them as much. And that's where, to your point, where, AI being incorporated into the conversation can really help because, if you have it as someone who can even just bear witness to a conversation between you and your manager, turn that conversation into some sort of input to help, the employee kind of figure out what their development plan might be, how a manager might feel about it. What I'm liking about sort of the way that you're framing it is really that it's a tool that kind of keeps those conversations going. It's not something that replaces those conversations. It just helps everyone show up maybe a little bit more equipped for them and makes them more productive, but it doesn't replace the actual act of having them, which is where the work is, right?
That's where the work is and that's where the requirement is, right? I mean, all of the research we've done on technology and, whether AI will replace your job brings us back to the whole point of hyper personalization, but hyper human interaction. There's a big need for human interaction with how we work these days, which is remote, which is often alone. Having that community to lean on, manager being part of that community, but also your peers and the folks that you work with, your team members. How do you create an environment where you're feeling like you can actually leverage the whole of that community versus feeling like you're on your own, which is, you know, why we're seeing a lowering of engagement, to be honest, in organizations, right? Engagement is at an all-time low because we don't know what's going to happen to our jobs. We feel like, some technology is going to come and take it away. We
Yeah.
don't have connections anymore at work. So, if you look at all of the data points, it's all about putting the H back into HR. The human aspect of HR is actually going to be paramount, and the strategic aspect of HR, all of the work that's repeatable and can be operationalized or is operationalized in HR, we can leverage AI for. But the work that really needs you to be strategic, be a thought leader, have the conversations, create community, create engagement cannot be operationalized, or we can't leverage AI for it. Of course, certain aspects, of course, you
Right.
can, not everything.
Yeah, you can use it to kind of maybe analyze data that shows some indications of things that you might need to look into or to do, right? For maybe identifying friction points between teams, right? Maybe that's something that
Yeah,
AI can kind of help
absolutely.
flag, but there certainly is, it's still up to us to be the ones to help address that, fix that, guide them, to a more productive kind of working environment. I think something that you mentioned that really kind of stood out to me too is you talked about it as a way to personalize the experience too. So personalization it's one of those things that I think that we just as people, as consumers, we've gotten so used to having highly personalized
It is.
algorithms, ads sent to us, right? So if we can use that as a way to highly personalize the work experience in some way, then that could, this is just a theory that I have, right? It's not that I don't have the scholarly research for it, but I think it's one of those things that when people feel like their work experience is somehow curated for them, you're going to start to see more engagement because it's them investing and engaging in themselves, which is then good for the company, right? It's like a good effect that way.
Absolutely. I mean, um, you know, when we started this conversation, actually, when we didn't start recording, but before that, you were talking about, what are the things, the top things that will drive the employee experience or, people teams in the future. I really strongly think that the first one is this AI driven hyper personalization, for an employee, because we're doing that everywhere else in our communities. Why not do it as an employee for organizations? The second one is really a reshaped global talent landscape. How
Mm,
do you leverage global talent because most organizations are hyper global these days. My company, we are in 18 different countries as legal entities, and then we employ, we have people all over the world. So, we have people all over the world in different countries, but we have 18 legal entities. So, how do you think about distributed work, economies, the macroeconomic environment that we live in? And that's going to be really pertinent to people teams and how to leverage that and think that through. We'll have a new era of insights driven HR. So most of the HR technology we use these days is very rear view looking,
Looking back, yeah.
thinking about how do we leverage what we have, which is a whole wealth of data from employees, to drive insights to help us figure out how the workplace should be designed in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other one is purpose led culture building, thinking about how do we drive a strong sense of purpose and joy within an organization,
Yeah.
which is more than just the monetary benefits of being there. It's aligned to something a higher order,
Yeah.
which proves that, once you draw that link with employees, your productivity,
It'll increase.
will
Yeah.
will will follow very quickly. And skills intelligence as a competitive advantage. How do you think about skills and how do you develop those skills to be a competitive advantage for you in the
Yeah.
industry?
Yeah. I think the skill development piece, especially within the context of specific organizations, is really, really juicy and interesting, and probably something I could talk about for days at a time just on itself, because it's, people's ability to perform at work is a combination of their own skills that they might already have, their level of sort of mental connection and engagement to the work that they're doing, and then also the context of the environment that allows those skills to thrive or that might hold those skills back. And
Exactly.
that's where there's, it's interesting because you're 5 weeks into a new job, right? I'm still new to even being the host of HR Voices. So we're kind of getting onboarded to new things ourselves. And it's kind of like an interesting reflection point to see, okay, how did the skills that I'm using in my job now show up in my last job? Are they translating? How is the environment of the job, making them either come out or hide or whatever that might look like? So I think that context is really the part that makes it really kind of juicy and interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's spot on. Spot on.
Yeah. So what's something you're excited about that you're working on right now with you and your team? I know you're just kind of getting started, so maybe everything's exciting.
I think the potential of what we can do, within this AI driven context that we are operating within, and to connect what we do from a product perspective with our customers, for product perspective for our internal customers, and making sure that we're not lagging behind, but we're actually, kind of leapfrogging ahead. That's what's exciting for my team and I. We've had several conversations and we're particularly excited about that aspect.
That's cool. And I agree. There is sort of this, I think technology is allowing us in HR to have something that's a little bit more future focused and looking ahead so we can truly be proactive as opposed to just sort of more of those lagging indicators of engagement, performance, whatever that is. And I think what's kind of been interesting is that I've seen, I've spoken to a lot of HR leaders in my career and even here just starting this series. It's like there's a lot that we already kind of knew. We can always say we know that employees who aren't engaged don't perform as well, right? Now, I think AI is actually making it easier for us to actually have the data to connect the dots to really prove that and show that. Because that used to be something that it wasn't necessarily subjective, but you had to dig deep to get the business numbers to tie that to the HR numbers to tell that story.
Yes.
And I think that's us being able to be better storytellers is going to help us to really usher in the new era of what HR can really do.
Yep, absolutely. And I think I always see technology as my team always says that I'm a glass half full person, and sometimes they say I'm a glass half overflowing person. It's interesting feedback, but I always look at you know change in the regular operation and motion of how we operate as a business, whether it is a pandemic or whether it's a technological revolution or a skills revolution, as something that is an opportunity for us to leverage. And
Yeah.
how cool is it that we're in the center of this AI world, and we are in technology in tech companies, very very close to it. a lot of our products are AI native products. So we are much closer to it than most other people. So why not use that as an opportunity to leverage what AI can bring, which is, connecting dots from data, and also, creating better experiences for us, right? So as long as we keep in mind that we need the human interaction, we need the connection, which will drive further productivity and not reduce that. I think
Right.
that's something to keep in mind for us.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I love that. Well, I know we're coming to the end of our conversation here. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to share with everybody listening?
I did my closing thoughts earlier, which was all around hyper personalization,
Yeah.
reshaping the global talent landscape, data driven insights for HR, purpose cultures, and skills intelligence.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's a really good sort of bullet point of, sort of where to focus your HR strategy for the next probably even 3, 4, 5 years, right? Not even just for this year. This is sort of it's a longer journey than just something that we can all kind of force to happen really quickly, right?
The long game.
Yeah. Well, Suni, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed this conversation. And thank you to everybody who's listening and, tune in to our next episode. And thank you for being here. Bye.
Okay.